Christie's just sold a painting created by artificial intelligence for $432,000. And I call BS. I think it's a bunch of crap. My name is Jason Roski. I'm the owner of the KC Auction Appraisal Company here in Kansas City, Missouri. And this week we're going to be talking about this episode, this project, this idea, this event that happened where Christie sold a painting created through artificial intelligence of a portrait that they sold for $432,000 against estimates of $8,000 to $10,000 roughly. Hey, Stace, thanks for watching. If you're watching, have any questions, thoughts, concerns, go ahead and post them here in the comments. I'll try and respond to those as we go along, and I'll give you contact information later in this week's episode of Behind the Gavel with Jason. Thank you for watching. But in a nutshell, I'm going to share this on my page here in just a second. There's so many interesting things about this project. I have no issues at all with Christie's selling a piece of artwork created through artificial intelligence. Makes perfect sense. It's happening a lot. It's been happening for quite some time now, actually. It seems like a new technology, but there are a lot of things out there that have been around for a while. There are artists around who have done this. Thomas Ruff, Mario Klingman. There are many others who are creating art through algorithm work, through artificial intelligence. There are groups like Obvious that made this portrait in particular. And so the idea that Christie's is offering this, and they offered it in their prints and multiples auction, which is exactly what it is. They can easily hit reprint, and the same painting can come out. And the painting was titled Edmon de Belamy from La Famille de Belamy by the French group called Obvious, which I think is an ironic name for an art producing company, but that is their title, that is their name. So Christie's claimed that it's the first portrait generated by an algorithm to come up for auction, which is patently false. Algorithmic artwork has been produced and created and consumed by the public for quite some time now. You can find all kinds of records of this coming up over the years. This is a newer iteration of it, but it's certainly not, it's newish technology. It's new technology in that what they use specifically is a bit new, but the idea of this is not new at all. The idea of using an algorithm to create something is something that has been around for quite some time. Obvious used a product or software, open source software, anybody can use it, called GAN, which is Generative Adversarial Network. And basically what they do is they took 15,000 portraits from the 14th to the 20th century, fed them into the machine, and the machine looked for a common optical denominator, and then reproduced it in their version. Jerry Salz, who's an art critic for the New York Times, has said it best. And he's talked about AI art for quite some time. And what's interesting is if you listen to Jerry, he talks a lot about its negativity and that it's washed out. It's very generic. It's very boring because it's taking all of these inputs and combining them. And so there's nothing unique. It's rote. His idea was give it some weird stuff and say, create something based on these inputs, and then you might get something interesting out of it. It's still art. Somebody has to come up with these ideas and do it. It's like Tracy Emin at her bed. She had to say, my bed is a sculpture, and so we sold it for a couple of $1 million. She had to do that. Same thing with artificial intelligence. Hey, Dalton, thanks for joining. I really want to come down to your shop down there in the Southwest sometime. The pictures I've seen on Instagram are spectacular. Great, great merchandise. If you like Southwest art, check out Dalton's website and Facebook page. He has great, great pieces. But anyway, back to what we're talking about. So Christie's had this, Christie's international print director, Richard Lloyd, came across a showing of Obvious's work. And he was just intrigued by it, which I think we all are. His direct quote is, "I just responded to it and thought it was cool." I get that. It kind of is cool. It looks like a generic old white guy, which if you're going to put in 15,000 portraits from the 14th to the 20th century, that's what you're going to get because there are so few portraits of anything but white guys, historically speaking. And then it took all that information and blended it into this mishmash that became Edmon de Belamy from La Famille Bellamy. They put it in the Prince of Multiples auction next to, they did, raise its status. They put it next to a Warhol and a Liechtenstein, kind of subliminally that gives it the same status as those works. We've talked about that before. What you're selling is important. It's also almost as important as to what you're selling it with. And they put a huge advertising and marketing campaign behind this. They had private showings. They had private phone calls. They contacted all of their collectors and dealers and said, this is something that's really interesting. They presented this as a portrait in a gilded frame, AI portrait in a gilded frame. And for some reason, and it's an anonymous buyer, which it almost always is on these spectacular results. It's an anonymous buyer who paid $432,000 for it. I think it's ridiculous. It's a piece of art. I can completely get that message. I can get behind that stand. I prefer something made by somebody's hands, but working in algorithms, there's definitely a creativity taking place there. But they can just print another one. It's just printing ink on canvas. There's no creativity to it beyond the initial representation of it. It can be reproduced a million times over. I kind of thought when I read this and saw this, when I read a lot of articles about it, it reminds me of Beanie Babies. People kind of feasted over them for a while, and then the market fell out because they just produced as much as they could sell. If Obvious and or other companies jump up and start trying to sell AI portraits for six figures, that's going to happen. They're going to sell a lot of it. The demand is going to be high for a while because of this, and then the supply is going to overtake that, and then people are like, what do we do with it? Nobody else wants it. One of the largest areas of reaction to this has been from artists who have been in that medium for a long time. A friend of mine on Instagram made comments about they have produced AI work for many years. They've actually sold works through auction before and done reasonably well. The German artist Mario Klingemann, who is the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Centre Pompidou in Paris, the British Library, amongst others, is an internationally known artist working in algorithms and AI artwork. Hey, Matt, thanks for joining. If you have any questions, post them, please. He said, when he was asked for comment about the picture before it sold, he said it looked like Connect the Dot children's painting, in specific reference to the Belamy portrait. I thought that was kind of funny and interesting and very telling. It's interesting that people who are deep into art have they acknowledge that it is art, that it is something that people had to take time and effort and skill to produce. But nobody out there that I can find is saying that this piece is worth $400,000 plus. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how that market evolves and develops over time. The other thing that I thought was kind of a really arrogant thing to say from Richard Lloyd, again, the international print director of Christie's, when he was talking and defending the sale of it and saying why it brought so much, his quote was, we're the people who sold to Leonardo for $450 million. Like, well, so of course, because you sold to Leonardo, everything you sell is absolutely worth 100 times its expectations. I thought that was one of the most epically arrogant comments I've ever heard from somebody in the auction industry. And again, I have nothing against Christie's. I have nothing against Sotheby's with the Banksy routine that happened a couple weeks ago. As auctioneers, as auction companies, our job is to incite passion and incite activity and excitement over what we're selling. That's our job. That's what we're supposed to do. But we're supposed to do it in a way that doesn't make people, doesn't take advantage of your customers. I mean, I can't imagine this person who paid $400,000 for this is going to be a repeat customer over and over and over again once this market settles, because these works are not worth $400,000. You can make them, you can buy them. Obvious is selling the related pieces for $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. I'm sure they've raised their prices since the auction because their phone has to be ringing off of the hook. But the day of the auction, you could have bought the rest of the family for $10,000 a piece. And Belamy was for sale for $10,000 roughly the weeks before Richard Lloyd found it, thought it'd be an interesting piece to add to the auction. And it was a flyer. I get it. They could have brought nothing. It could have had no interest, and it could have had, it ended up having a lot of interest. But I can't imagine that the person who spent so much money on it is going to go forward and say, I think I got a deal. I can't believe that I only paid $400,000 for it. I think there's going to be a huge roller coaster with this market as it establishes itself. Kind of like Bitcoin. Honestly, when you look at Bitcoin values over the last 10 years, that's been around for 10 years already. It's had epic highs and epic lows and everything in between. I think as those markets, those new areas of collecting, new areas of art come to the fore, you're going to see that same kind of up and down, that same kind of, we're not sure, is it going to be worth this in the future? Or am I just buying it because I like it today? And is it worth $400,000 to hang on my wall? To some people, that might be the case. Obviously, to this person, it was. So that's kind of, just look at my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything that I thought was interesting. I think that is about it. Again, I think it's a fascinating subject. I think it's going to be really curious to watch that going forward, to see what happens the next time. Because Obvious is going to want us, Obvious will want to sell pictures in Christie's again. It will be interesting to see what Christie's does with that, what estimates are in the future, what results are in the future, and when Edmon de Belamy comes back on the market, because everything comes back on the market at some point. It might be next year, it might be a decade from now, it might be 50 years from now. It'll be interesting to see what the market does to it, then how it responds on the second time around, the third time around. And so that's going to be really fascinating to watch. Hey, Kevin, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, we're talking about the Edmon de Belamy artificial intelligence-produced painting selling for $432,000 at Christie's last week. I'm just getting kind of ready to wrap it up. If anybody has questions, please post them here. You can always send us a direct message. You can also give us a call at 816-283-3633, or you can send us an email at info@kcauctioncompany.com. We had a lot of people watching today. Appreciate that. Share this with your friends, with your colleagues, with your family. If you think they might find this topic interesting for whatever reasons. And again, just to kind of touch about what we're talking about before. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think Dirk or I could get $400,000 for a piece of artificial intelligence artwork right now. I agree with you completely, Kevin. But so yeah, the artificial intelligence art market is going to be really interesting to watch as our worlds become more and more digitized. Will there be people drawn to it? Will there be a backlash of people going back to more traditionally formed created artwork? That's just going to be a fun and interesting thing to watch over the next 10 to 20 to 50 years, as long as hopefully we're all alive watching this today. Next week, we're going to go revisiting an old topic about using your china and crystal. The holidays are coming up. A lot of people, that's the only time of the year that they use their good china and their good crystal and their good silver. We're going to talk about why we think you should use it all of the time, and how that affects future generations and their appreciation for those things. And we're seeing that in the marketplace today. So again, thank you all for watching. We're into November already. The temperatures have gotten cooler here in Kansas City. You all know I love the fall and winter weather here, so I'm excited about that. We're going to continue this conversation going forward. If you have comments, thoughts, concerns, again, we give you all the contact information. If you have thoughts about ideas for conversations going forward, we'd love to get your input on that. We've been doing this over a year now, over 50 episodes. It's a fun thing, but I always love to hear from you guys and see what you want to hear about. So thank you all for watching, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a great weekend.